Alright, in today's video I'm going to talk about Latin, neuter, nouns, and adjectives. You knew this day would come. We've been talking about masculines and feminines, and now we're going to get into this third gender of neuters. But don't worry, it's pretty easy. Just make sure you're paying attention, and yeah, let's go. Before I show you the forms themselves, I'm going to talk about a couple rules that are always true about neuters and make things a lot easier. The first one is that neuter nominatives and accusatives always look like each other. What that means is for neuter nouns and adjectives, the nominative singular form will look like the accusative singular form every time, and the neuter plural form will always look like the nominative plural form will always look like the accusative plural form. The second rule is that neuter, nominative, and accusative plurals, whether they're nouns or adjectives, always end in the letter A. And that's true whether it's second declension or third declension or even fourth declension, which you guys haven't had yet, but neuter, nominative, and accusative plurals always end in the letter A. Alright, let's get a look at how these look in each declension. And we'll start with the first declension because that's the easiest one for neuters because there aren't any neuters in the first declension, which is nice. As you know, most first declension nouns are feminine and the rest are masculine, but there are never any neuters. Now, neuter second declensions do exist. There are a lot of them, but they're much easier, or they're easy to remember, and I'm going to type them out here, what one of them might look like. Let's give you one like studium, studii, neuter. Okay, and before anyone asks me how you know one of these is neuter, yeah, this little letter, that's going to tell you, but you'll notice they end in in the nominative singular. They still end in this long I. It should be a long I. I can't type that. Still end in that long I in the genitive singular. But there you go. That's a second declension neuter. Okay, third declension ones are also pretty easy. And let's use one like Carmen. Don't correct that. Carmenis. And that's going to be neuter. Okay, there you go. Carmen, Carmenis, neuter. And how do you know it's neuter? Again, don't ask me questions like that because there's that N right there. But you'll notice like our other third declensions, the nominative singular and the genitive singular don't have the same stem. The stem of this noun, like all third declension nouns, like all nouns, comes from the genitive, and there it is, Carmen, there's the stem. And is our genitive ending. That's how you know it's third declension, that genitive ending. But there you go, there's a third declension. Now, are there any consistent endings for third declension neuter nouns? Like for the nominative, well, there are a few that show up over and over, like N, there you go, Carmen, or even us, which is weird because it's going to look like some second declensions, like tempus, temporis is a good third declension neuter. Notice, like the plural of this doesn't become tempi, the stem is tempor here, but yep, these are third declension neuters. Okay, so here are the second declension neuter endings, and they always look like this, and this is nice, and they follow our rules. Nominative and accusative singular look the same. Nominative and accusative plural look the same. And nominative and accusative plural end in A. Okay, so let's see how a second declension neuter is going to look with the endings. But how do we know this is neuter? That letter tells you. And how do we know it's second declension? It has a long I on the genitive. That's the only declension where we have a long I on the genitive. But before we form these, we're going to need to know what the stem is, and so I'm going to very carefully outline the stem there. Just go to the genitive, take off the genitive ending, and that's the stem. And so we're going to get imperii, that's our stem. Okay, so now that we have the stem, and I've taken the liberty of writing that stem 10 times there, let's put the endings on. And, oh yeah, why is it 10 times? Well, we need singular and we need plural for every case, nominative, genitive. By the way, if you don't know this order, this nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative order, if you don't know that, you're going to have to learn that. You have to learn that. But what are the endings? E, I'm going to try to do these as carefully as possible, but bear with me. O, o, a, or is, is. So a lot like second declension masculine, but not exactly, right? We're still following our rules. These look the same. These look the same, and they end in a. Okay, the nominative and accusative singulars look the same. Nominative, accusative, plurals look the same. But there you go. Okay, well, now let's do the third declension neuter endings. And these ones are a lot like the other third declensions. There's just a few differences, right? One is that blank form of the nominative is also carried through to the accusative singular. And again, you got to remember, singular, plural, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. That's an order of words that you need to know. And then in the plural, these look the same, nominative and accusative plural, and they end in a. But other than that, these endings are pretty much the same. That makes it easy. Alright, now let's put those third declension neuter endings on an actual third declension neuter word. How do you know it's neuter? That N tells you. How do you know it's third declension? Well, that is genitive ending tells you it's third declension. There are two mistakes that a lot of people make here. One of them is believing that this is a second declension because it ends in us, but it isn't. It's a third declension. How do you know? You go to the genitive. The genitive will always tell you. The nominative can be deceptive. Okay, the other mistake people make is believing that the stem is temp. Because they just look at that first nominative form and they get suckered. They get suckered into thinking that temp, it goes tempus, tempi, tempo. It doesn't. Okay, tempor is the stem. Okay, and you might recognize this from words like contemporary or temporary or extemporaneous or things like that, but it means time. But tempor is the stem. Alright, so let's look at how these endings are going to go on there. Again, these are singular and plural, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. Okay, and how are you going to put these together? Well, blank. Okay, so there's nothing there. Is, e, blank, ah. Okay. And then in the plural, ibus, ibus. So notice again, these two forms are the same, these two forms are the same, and they end in a in the plural. Now, if there are neuter nouns, there must logically be neuter adjectives because we know a couple things about nouns and adjectives. The first one is that adjectives have to agree with nouns in gender. That means that just like adjectives have to be masculine to agree with masculine nouns and feminine to agree with feminine nouns, they're going to have to be able to be neuter to agree with neuter nouns, but I'll show you how this works. And the second thing is that adjective forms can be either 2, 1, 2, that is, masculine forms look like the second declension, feminine forms look like first declension, and neuter forms look like neuter second declensions, or they can be third declension forms. And I'll show you how each of these will work, and then we'll decline a couple next to each other and show you how they look that way. Okay, so let's take a look at 2, 1, 2 adjectives and how these neuter endings are going to work with 2, 1, 2 adjectives. 2, 1, 2, again, just means that masculines look like second declension, feminines look like first, and second declension, and neuters look like second declension neuters. So you can see here, and I'll write this, the masculine forms are here, feminine forms are here, neuter forms are going to be there, but the masculine forms go us, e, o, e, orum, is, os, is. Just like you're used to, and the feminine ones go I, arum, is, as, is, just like you're used to for first declensions. And the second declension neuter forms are going to be fairly predictable, and I will write them. So we're going to start with but then we're going to go with e. That's a long I. O, o. Okay. Then we're going to go orum, is, is. Now I want you to notice a few things. For the most part, these look like these over here. Okay, I'll get on my pointer. These look like, come over with my pointer here, the masculines, and these look like, well, these. But these neuter plural nominative and accusatives, kara, kara, they look a lot. I'm going to draw your attention over here to the nominative singular feminine. And these can be confused for each other sometimes, but you got to remember these are modifying nouns. So, you know, if you see a nominative singular feminine noun, then chances are this modifies it. But if you see a neuter nominative or accusative plural noun, chances are that it's this instead. Third declension adjectives and the neuter work pretty much the same way, and actually this part is a little easier because masculine and feminine forms look exactly the same. But let me show you. First, we're going to determine what exactly the stem of this adjective is, and it's easy because we're going to go to this first form and take off the is bit, and that's the stem. Now, easy as that. There we go. That's our stem, written a bunch of times because it's going to show up in every form. And I'll just go ahead and take the liberty of adding the endings on that are masculine and feminine, which are exactly the same. All right, there they are, the masculine, feminine endings. And again, it goes nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. Same thing down here, and these are plural, whereas these up here are singular. And there are a few things that are maybe unexpected that we didn't talk about explicitly all that much. Notice the ablative singular doesn't have a short e, it has a long I. In fact, if it did have a short e, it would look like the neuter nominative and therefore accusative singular. So it doesn't. It looks like 4t. That's a little weird. Also, if you look at the genitive plural, we have this I-U-M thing going on, and that's a little weird. So you just get a couple I's where you otherwise wouldn't in nouns. But those are the only differences. For the neuters, you're going to do almost the same thing, except you're going to follow the rules that we set out before. Let me show you. Okay, for the neuters, we're just going to add those third declension endings, is, e. We have long I there, just like here. Okay, and ium, ibus, and ibus. But we have to follow our rules, so the nominative and accusative singular are the same. And the nominative and accusative plural are the same, and they end in a. Okay, so we're still always following these rules. Now the one weird thing again, and we're still pulling in this I in the genitive plural, but we also added an I here, and therefore we added an I there. We get an I that is not there in the masculine and feminine form. So that's just a little weird, but there it is. Blank is e, same as nominative, e. Ia, ium, ibus, ia, ibus. And these are third declension adjectives in the neuter. Okay, let's see if we can decline a couple of these together. So here we have an adjective, and you know it's an adjective. It doesn't have a gender. It doesn't say the gender here. It just gives you the masculine and feminine form, omnis, and the neuter form, omne. And then auxilium, that's our noun, you know because it gives you a gender. And it says neuter, and it's second declension, and you know that because of that I ending. By the way, omnis, omna, over here, this is a third declension adjective. You know because it doesn't say us, right? Instead it gives you this sort of is ending and this e ending over here. Okay, I'm going to start out by writing actually the noun ending. So first, actually, I'm going to need the stem, and the stem can be found in the genitive. We're going to very carefully chop off that genitive I ending. And the endings, I know, are going to be e. Those are given to you, actually, in the dictionary entry. E, o, o, a, or is, is. Good. And then I'm going to do the adjective, and the adjective stem, actually, you just take off the ending from the stem there, O-M-N, so I've actually typed all that out already, and I'm going to use the neuter form, not the masculine feminine one, so this is going to be E. And actually I'm just going to go right down to the accusative. I know those have to be the same, and here I'm going to go omnia, those have to be the same and have to end in A, and we added in an I there in the nominative and accusative plural, and then I'm going to add the rest of the endings. Blank, is, blank, actually, whoop, long I there. Let me erase. Okay, and that's going to be a long I again. Ia, ium, ibus, ia, ibus. Notice again, they don't have to have the same endings. Okay, the adjective and noun, but they do have to agree in case, number, and gender. And there you go.